Welcome back to Pop Culture Victim.
Yeah.
I'm your host. He's your host. We're both hosts. We're hosting this thing together.
Yeah, I don't know who... I guess you would be considered the host of this episode, because this is the album you suggested.
Oh. Well, I'm your host, Seth, the Tennessee Machine Trivet, and that's Jordan the Longbeard Lowry, the Golden God himself. He used to be blue, once again, now he's green. I don't know what it means.
I don't either, I like it though.
Right? He used to be blue, but now he's green.
There's a song called Goddamn Lonely Love by the Drive-By Truckers. And there's a line in that says, I've got greens and I've got blues, and every day there's a little less difference between the two. Same thing. I don't really know what it means, but it sounds cool.
It sounds good. Sounds like he knows what he's saying.
So do you want to give me some information about the album first, like we did with the Who's Next album?
Oh, yeah. Well, really.
So today's album is Change Today ?
Yep.
By T.S.O.L, also known as True Sounds of Liberty.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. First and foremost, they were kind of one of the few punk bands, in my opinion, that really couldn't be considered a punk band, right? Like, you listen to this album and you're like, okay, I see that, you know, like, you have the other side. You listen to the other side about the Vietnam conflict. It's pretty much as straight punk as it gets, because that's about the only track, though, that you'll notice, because every other track, as you've mentioned, it sounds like a new wave album. It sounds like they listened to some fucking new wave.
Yeah, that was, and it's weird, too, because I think it said it came out in 83 or 84, and so it was, you know, new wave kind of started in like the late 70s, but it didn't really get big until like the mid 80s. So this is still early on in like the new wave scene. And I really liked the way that they incorporated it with their punk sound that they had on their previous albums.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, they meshed it together really well.
And they knew how to play their instruments.
Yeah, that's another note. Like I said, we'll get to my notes in a minute, but yeah, that's one thing I noticed. It was like, it is a punk album, but there's guitar solos, there's drum fills, there's like actual like breaks where it's just bass. There's like all kinds of stuff going on that you don't expect from just a typical punk rock album.
You're expecting...
Yeah, you expect 3 chords and lyrics about fucking the establishment, but that's not what you get.
No, this guy's getting emotional, talking about his life, talking about the world around him. I mean, honestly though, if I had to, my personal favorite on this album is going to be The Other Side. That's the first song I heard, and I had to track it down. I literally I heard it in a documentary. I was like, this guy's singing about some real shit right here. And it sounds good. This guy has a killer voice. And I'm like, how do I find this? So I'm looking it up. I'm looking up the lyrics and stuff on Google. Not finding it. So I give up. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to listen to the discography now. Because I want to listen to these guys and see what they're all about. Finally fucking find it. On this album. And I'm like, okay, well... Thank you. Because that ever happened to you? Where you're just trying to find a fucking song and you have lyrics, you can't find it?
Yep.
It's so annoying. It's the worst.
Google has gotten better about that, though. Like, you can type in, usually if you know at least the band or the artist that does it, and then you type in, like, one lyric, Google's gotten better, can usually find it. But yeah, I remember, you know, when were you searching for this? Like, I mean, if it was more than like 2 or 3 years ago.
No, it's like 7 years ago.
I was going to say, if it was more than 2 or 3 years ago, then yeah, it's only very recent that Google has gotten really good about it. Or even like streaming services like Apple Music and Spotify used to suck when you were just trying to like search for lyrics. But now they both have, like, if you can search for the lyric, they can usually find what song it is. But yeah. 7 years ago, same thing, man. I was typing shit into YouTube, hoping I could find it.
You're just fucking angry. Dude, I remember, that was back when I thought I was straight edge. That's how long ago that was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't doing anything but just listening to music and being angry. Like,
and there's nothing wrong with being straight edge.
Absolutely not.
But it's
I actually look up to you guys.
It's very much a mindset that you have to stick to. I know a few straight edge people.
It's a commitment, dude.
And they're great people.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing about being straight edge is that you don't judge other people for not being straight edge, because that's what you run into a lot. But the people I know, there's only a handful of them, but the ones that I know that are full-on straight edge, they don't care that if we're hanging out, if I have a drink, or if I, do whatever. Like, they're totally fine with it. It's just, it's more of a thing. You could almost call it, like, a religious thing.
Yeah.
It's like, no, man, like, this works for me. It might not work for you, and that's fine,
I just admire those people, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Most of the time, they're also following, like, a strict vegan diet.
Yep.
It's just insane to me that, because it's healthy.
They meditate a lot.
Yeah.
Even if it's not, like, conventional meditation, it's just, like, they take, just taking 30 minutes of your day and just being with your own self,
Which is something I've recently learned how to do as well. It's very important. It's good for the soul. But T.S.O.L, True Sounds of Liberty. I love that name.
I do too.
Because it reminds me of the Sons of Liberty. And, I really like U.S. history.
So I didn't know what it stood for until you recommended this album. I had heard T.S.O.L, I had heard the name, but I had not really dove into their music. I had not looked up what it stood for. So my immediate first thought, which wasn't far off from what it means, T.S.O.L, I thought it meant the Statue of Liberty.
That'd be fucking cool.
And so I wasn't far off when I looked it up. It was like, oh, True Sounds of Liberty. I was like, I was pretty fucking close. I was close. Same idea.
I like how we both gave each other albums, too, where they were actually trying to pick up all the instruments.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's crazy.
That's another thing I had about the production on this album. Okay. Yeah, I picked that up because, like I said, I listened to this album first, like, all the way through. Didn't take any notes, just listening.
Yeah.
And then I listened to it again full 3 or 4 times all the way through. And then certain songs I listened to, like, almost 10 times. The standout tracks that were, like, my favorites I listened to quite a bit. But yeah, overall, I listened to the album all the way through, no stops. Like, because it's a short album. It's only about 29 minutes.
Yeah, it's not long.
All the way through 5 times, like fully all the way through. And then, like I said, there are some standout tracks, in my opinion, that I went back to. I use Apple Music, so I have a playlist on there, and I just call it the dumbest shit imaginable. I've told you about this playlist.
I remember that.
What it is, I just any song that I hear, no matter what genre, no matter who the artist is, no matter what, if I like that song, I just add it to that playlist. And that playlist has over like 10,000 songs in it now.
That's a lot.
It's funny because I'll put that playlist like on shuffle. If I don't know what I want to listen to, I'll just throw that on shuffle because it's got everything in it. It takes a couple seconds to load because there's so many songs in it. Every other playlist I have, it like immediately loads up and starts, but that one takes a little bit. But anyway, there was, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of the 10 songs on here made it onto that playlist.
Damn.
So, I mean, I liked it. And the ones that didn't, I still liked enough that I enjoyed the album as a whole.
Yeah. I want you guys to know, too, just because I look like this, I'm not going to be recommending punk albums every fucking time, I promise. I listen to everything.
Yeah. And that's, I'm not just going to give him just a bunch of classic rock either. Like, it's going to be varied. Like, these were just the first ones that when we thought of, it's like, it was kind of happenstance. It's like,
I was literally listening to this at this time.
Yeah, Seth told me, he's like, when we came up with this idea, I was listening to this album, so I thought it'd be good. And literally, like, when he came up with this idea, I had just listened to, like, Baba O'Reilly again on its own, so I was like, oh, who's next? That's perfect.
Duh. It all just kind of clicked, guys. And I really hope this lights a fire for you guys, too. I hope you're enjoying it. I really hope that we get some comments and some feedback, because it's something I'm pretty passionate about. I'd like to see interaction, 100%. I know that I keep saying that, but back to the album.
All right, so what I did, I'll give my final score at the end.
Yeah.
So some things, I will say my favorite song on the album was Flowers by the Door, track number 5. And I've got some notes as to why, but just Some observations off the top. Joe Wood, the vocalist, he has a voice very similar to Jim Morrison of The Doors. That was my first thought. That I was like, this, if The Doors had survived through the early 70s, you know, because Jim Morrison died in 1971.
Which blows.
If they had survived through the 70s and he was still with them and they took influence from punk, this is The Doors if they did a punk album, is what it sounds like.
I never thought of it like that. But yeah, I can hear it now.
Well, it's funny because I had because I do this on my own. I will listen to a band's full discography and rank like the albums, like from my favorite to least favorite. I had just done that with The Doors just a few days before I listened to this album. So I was like, this sounds like it could be a Doors album. Like, if they had still been around in the 80s, this is what they probably would have ended up sounding like.
I've always loved The Doors, man.
He also has a little bit of, it kind of sounds like Robert Smith from The Cure.
Oh, you're right.
And I can see a lot of The Cure influences, because, I mean, The Cure came out first in 79.
Yeah, and weren't they technically kind of new wave?
Yeah, they were kind of like new wave, punk, gothic, rock, kind of like that. And there's a lot of gothic influence in this, too.
Very.
And so, yeah, it sounds like, well, actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, it sounds like what Jim Morrison would sound like if he sang for The Cure. That's what this album kind of sounded like to me.
That is a genius way to look at it, dude. I need to take that out of my vocabulary, but it is. It's a genius way to look at it.
And so, so I looked up some information about the album. It says it's classified as gothic punk, but like I said, it sounds like there's a lot of new wave influences as well.
I see it more of a new wave album than anything, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, though.
Another thing, it doesn't sound dated. I wrote down in quotes timeless, and not as like, oh, it's a classic album, or oh, it's a best-selling album. Timeless is in like, it sounds like it could have been recorded yesterday.
Yeah, it holds up.
Like, it doesn't sound dated at all. It sounds like it could have been recorded in the 70s or yesterday. It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
So, and then breaking down some of the tracks, Black Magic is a perfect album opener. Also like how it's one word, Black Magic. Perfect album opener. It really sets the tone.
It does.
It almost works as like an overture, because you can see like the paths that they're going to take throughout that album.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's like they're literally painting a picture with that one. It's funny too, like you're saying, just one phrase, but it literally paints and gives you the tone that you need for this album. You're going to you know what you're going to see.
And that's what you need in an opening track, whether it's just like a short intro track or like a full-on song. That's what you need to like let the listener know, like, hey, this is what you're getting into. Let's do it.
If you want to stay, you can stay. You know?
So, also found on the track In Time, there's like some Eastern and Indian influences. Like, the guitar part sounds like it was kind of played on like a sitar almost.
Yeah. These guys were musicians.
The ratings for the songs. Black Magic, I gave a 7. Just Like Me, I gave a 9. And In Time, I gave an 8. And then the next song, Red Shadows. Great song. I gave this one a 7 as well. The outro of that song is my favorite part, though, because it's almost like Behind Blue Eyes from The Who. Like, the outro completely changes and comes out of nowhere. That's a great part, because I mean, and it's almost like, because before that the song is kind of repetitive, and then all of a sudden just huge shift.
Check out what we've got. You know what I mean?
And then so this is just all the way through. The bass is really like up front in the mix, which is very unusual for like this style. That's what I wrote. The bass is very up front in the mix, not something very typical for punk style music.
No.
So it's
which is part of the reason it can suck sometimes. I mean, it's hard. As a lover of punk music, I only like a handful of bands. I swear to God. Because there are only a handful of bands that were actually good.
Yeah.
Like, these guys could play their instruments, for example. Fear could play their instruments. You know?
Let's see. So then we get to my favorite track, Flowers by the Door, 10.
I love that song, dude.
Love it. Wrote down Flowers by the Door is my favorite track so far. The guitar harmonics toward the end of the song are perfect, along with the guitar solo that plays along with the second chorus.
Yeah, you would expect to have a solo.
Which is very odd. It's odd, but it works really well because they didn't place it by itself. Like, it's playing while the chorus is happening.
Yeah.
Like, but it fits really well with the vocals and the guitar part. Great. Then we get American Zone, which I also rated a 10. I said American Zone is the most Doors-sounding song, and it would have fit on any of their later albums.
That is true.
So
it's 100% true.
And by later albums, I mean albums with Jim Morrison, because they released 3 albums after Jim Morrison died. But specifically Morrison Hotel and L.A. Woman, like, American Zone would have fit perfectly. Even like lyrically.
Yeah.
It's something that Jim Morrison would have done.
For sure.
Oh, and this is where I made the note. The production of this album doesn't sound muddy like most 80s albums, especially punk. It sounds very clean. That's what I wrote.
And I hate how they took pride in it sounding like shit.
Yeah, back then, that was like the thing. It's like, if it doesn't sound like it was recorded in a garage, like,
it's
10 football fields away.
Yeah, it's so narrow, so narrow.
Then we get to It's Gray, which is weird because it's my least favorite song on the album, but it holds my favorite lyric on the album.
Which would be?
When I look in your eyes, I see all I fear. That's my favorite lyric from the album.
That's beautiful, too.
It's just so odd that it takes place in my least favorite song. I gave that song a 6. Yeah, I don't know what's happening with that. I gave that song a 6, which is the lowest rating. But like I said, it holds my favorite lyric. Then we get to John.
Good old John.
Which I rated a 7. And the chord progression in the verses of John almost sounds like a pop song. It's like the poppiest one.
Oh, yeah.
It also sounds, the drum break.
Which
is...
out of nowhere.
Again, out of nowhere. Incredible. And, like you said before, it showcases that these guys actually had, like, musical talent. It was not just 4 on the floor, 3 chords. Like, it was literally, like, well-structured, multi-layered songwriting.
That's why a lot of people were turned off by this kind of stuff. You can't find the gems if you don't look for them, though. That's the main thing. Like, there are gems in every genre.
Yeah, and I don't know, because, of course, I wasn't alive in this time, so...
Right, me either.
It just blows my mind that this kind of inventive new wave gothic punk didn't get more recognition than it did.
Right. Because it's, honestly, man, it's... I hate to describe it this way, but it's true, though. This is what it's sexy, but it's dark, and at the same time provocative somehow. It's got everything. It's got a blend of everything that makes things good to me.
More comparisons that I would give to the Doors as well.
That's true.
Sexy, dark, and provocative.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my God.
That's like I said. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, if you're a big fan of the Doors and you listen to this album, you're not gonna be like, you know, exactly. But you can easily tell, like, the influences. Like, these guys were easily influenced by, like, of course, the punk rock, but more of, like, the almost psychedelic and, like, art rock of the 70s.
It's like they wanted to give a vibe.
Yeah.
They wanted to give you a vibe.
And they created, like, their own kind of sound. Because almost any other, like, punk or even albums like The Cure, like the gothic rock stuff, it doesn't sound like this.
My biggest problem that I have with bands that started coming around, punk in the 80s and stuff, and metal in the 80s and 90s, is used to with bands, and I heard Phil Anselmo said this from Pantera, used to with bands you would get, that you would have 4 guys that had 10 favorite bands, and they would just try their best to rip off those 10 fucking bands. Somewhere down the line, it got lost in translation where these people would only have, like, 2 favorite bands. So they would just start ripping off 2 favorite bands, and they'd never actually find their sound.
Yep.
The way to find your sound is to take all your influences and blend them together.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like rock and roll is kind of lost. That's why it kind of turns people off, because now it's not raw and real.
No.
And it's, hip-hop and stuff, it has taken over because it's a little bit more, it's, I wouldn't say real.
It's more relevant.
Yeah, but they claim that it's real. And that speaks to people. People are like, oh, yeah, these dudes are real.
But it's also, it's a fine line, too, because it's also not the popular rap that you're going to get that from.
That is true.
You're only going to get it from artists like, the best example is Kendrick Lamar.
Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah, like those Wu-Tang Clan, Kendrick Lamar, The Roots.
Oh, the
people
Roots,
like that who are mainstream, but are still like another good one, J. Cole.
Tyler, the Creator.
Tyler, the Creator. A lot of the new Jay-Z stuff, like, still mainstream, but not just the regular, like, mumble rap. Like, I can't get behind a lot of that.
Me either. I just, I love hip-hop too much to actually, and I know that's, but but yeah, I do. I love that style of music. So whenever I see it being portrayed in a phony manner to get kids to abuse themselves, it turns me off completely.
Yeah.
Because that's not what art's about.
No. And I feel like, coming back to this album,
let's
just, well, I mean, everything that we just said can apply to this because it is raw, it is real, it's not just fuck the establishment like every other punk album at this time was. Like, it's literally, like, life experiences, like, talking about, like, hopes, aspirations, like, it's real stuff.
Hopelessness.
Yep.
I mean, and everybody can relate. Everybody can relate to this album.
Then we come to Nice Guys, which I rated an 8. And I said it's the happiest sounding song.
It is.
It's also the shortest. It's only a minute and a half.
You can only produce serotonin for so long.
Yeah. It's a perfect little break, though, because the few songs before that are kind of like the darker stuff. So it's a perfect little breakup. Then we come to How Do, which sounds like I wrote. This is not in a bad way, but I wrote it sounds like a jokey Western song.
It does.
And it's not. That doesn't mean it's bad. The other observation I found that Ron Emery, who is one of the guitarists, sang lead vocals on End Time and How Do. So then we get to the things that I would have changed. I would have had Joe Wood sing all the tracks.
Right.
I prefer his voice much better than Ron Emery.
Me too.
I would have the album end with John, and instead of How Do, I would put How Do where John is and move John to the last song. And then the only other thing, I would bring the drums up just a little bit in the mix.
Same.
But yeah, other than that, I really like the album. It was a great introduction to a band that I had not really dove into. So I gave the album 7.5 out of 10. It was a straight up like 7.50.
That is a great rating.
Yeah.
That's a great rating.
And like I said, and it would have been, I feel like it would have been higher if those changes had been made. It probably would have been about a 9 if Joe Wood had sang all of it, if the drums were just a little bit higher in the mix, and if they had swapped John and How Do in the track listing. Because I feel like John would be a stronger closing song, because How Do almost sounds like a novelty song. But a lot of bands during the 70s and 80s, if they were going to do a song like that, a lot of them chose to end the album like that, and that's always something that's bothered me, no matter what genre it is.
I really can't blame you. Just like, sometimes, too, the ending of an album, it's like, I don't know. It feels like random. Like it's just kind of tossed
there.
Which is what this kind of felt like.
Yeah, and it was, and like I said, it's not even just a one genre thing. Like I've seen rock do it, I've seen metal do it, I've seen rap do it. It's almost just like they.
Well, this is it.
Yeah, I don't want to sound pretentious, like I know what the fuck I'm doing when it comes to producing albums and sequencing track lists.
I've never done it.
But I feel like I could make some good decisions, like with the songs that they have, and be like, this one needs to end the album. But, you know, again, what do I know?
And like you're saying, it's super subjective, because that could have very well been their thought process.
Yeah.
They just thought it sounded good for the ending of the album. I have to agree with you, though. It's just fucking random.
Yeah.
Well, like, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of it, you're expecting, like, something to come full circle.
Yeah. You're either expecting something along the lines of the darker stuff that was in the middle of the album to kind of end it, or even one of the more happier, poppy sounding songs to end like on a hopeful note. Either way would have been good, but instead you end on this like novelty song that kind of throws off the rest of the flow of the album.
What I like is when an artist of any kind or a band of any kind, kind of like what The Who did with Who's Next, is whenever they start an album a certain way and end it the exact same way, like a wraparound. You know what I mean?
Another really good example of that is The Wall by Pink Floyd. The first song on that album starts with a spoken word saying, "Where we came in." And you're like, what the fuck does that mean? But the very last song ends with that same kind of atmosphere, and the spoken word said, "This is where." And then the album restarts and says, "We came in." So it's "This is where we came in." And
Hell yeah!
And it all keeps, like if you listen to it continuously, it just keeps flowing together.
Well, those guys were musical geniuses too.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's just...
But yeah, so, like I said, 7.50 out of 10. Like I said, 6 of the 10 tracks, so 60% of the album made it onto my favorites playlist, basically.
Yeah.
So
I don't really have a lot of facts for this one that I could share with you, because it's not like they documented these bands very well.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I tried to look some stuff up, but it's just... the only thing I can really say about it is it looks like it was a precursor to New Wave.
Yeah.
You know, because later on, like you said, probably about 5 years.
Well, like I said, New Wave had kind of started in the 70s, but it didn't really hit its stride until like the mid-80s. So like 2 or 3 years after this album is when it really like got into the mainstream. So yeah, it's almost like, you know, they kind of helped ushered it in, I guess. So what is the album you recommend for me for next week? And I'll have to write it down if you've still got that pen.
Somewhere. Yeah, dude. Yeah, let me have you. There you go.
All right. What do we got?
I want you to go with a band that I absolutely love.
Okay.
And I think you could probably... You'll probably agree with me. We have a similar ear, but I'm not sure. I'll probably be shocked.
Okay.
Clutch.
Oh, I love Clutch.
Oh, okay, so you already know. Blast Tyrant. That is a perfect album, in my opinion.
So I know which album you're talking about. It's got the weird white dude, like, sitting on a throne on the cover.
Yeah.
I have not heard the whole thing. The only ones I've heard... The Mob Goes Wild.
Tasty.
Which is one of my favorite songs, but I've not heard the whole album. So that's one of my favorite songs by them and in general.
Yeah.
Alright, cool deal.
He said, alright.
I'm really excited for that, because that's one of, because I've listened to quite a bit of Clutch, but that's one of the albums I've not listened to all the way through.
Oh, yeah.
The only ones I've listened to all the way through, their technically newest one from like 2018, the Oblivion to Beale Street. That one's really good, and the Elephant Riders,
I love
which
Elephant
is
Riders.
One of my absolute favorite albums of all time. But it's funny that you said this, though. I've only recently, within like the last year, kind of gotten into Clutch.
Oh.
And it wasn't that I didn't like them before, it's just the fact that I'd never encountered them before. And what actually got me into them was one of their songs is used in The Walking Dead.
Yeah, Regulator.
Yep.
But, this is what turned me on to Clutch, is fucking Viva La Bam. Because they added the, I had the DVD collection for Viva La Bam when I was in, like, 6th grade.
Oh, like the whole thing?
Yeah, all of them.
Oh, yeah.
All of them. Because we didn't have cable at my house. So I would just buy a bunch of DVDs and shit of, like, stuff that I enjoyed. And that was one of the Mob Goes Wild was one of the tracks on the special features.
Yeah.
It was one of the, because Bam Margera shot the music video for absolutely free in a bar in Philadelphia somewhere.
Yeah. funny story about Viva La Bam. We'll end on this. I loved that show in like middle school and high school. That's when it was coming on when I was young. So my family kind of had this tradition because it's me, my mom, my dad, and I have a sister. But my sister had moved out at this time. Every Friday night, my dad would leave work, and he would stop and get food from somewhere. Like all the other nights, like we would have, my mom would cook, or we'd have leftovers or whatever. But every Friday, my dad would stop, usually at Pal's, and get food. And I don't know why or how, because my dad never really liked shows like this, but he liked Viva La Bam as well. So every Friday night, me and my dad would be sitting in the living room, eating Pals, watching Viva La Bam, because that's when the new episodes came on.
Coincidentally, you know something funny? I got my dad into that show.
Dude,
he sat down and he was like, what are these guys doing?
It's literally just, I think it just brings out, like, the kid in you again. Because, those dudes were, like, 25 and 30 at the time, but they're just acting like teenagers.
And Jackass, man.
Yeah, that's why, like, and it's mostly males that like that stuff. And I know a lot of women are just like, I don't see how you find this funny.
Is stupid.
I don't see how you find this funny. It's like, well, I mean, because it just makes me think of, like, when I was, like, 15.
When I used to do shit like this. Because I used to do shit like that all the time.
Oh, yeah, everybody. That's why they had to put that warning, like, don't fucking do this, and don't send us videos of you doing this.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to get sued anymore.
Anyway, 7.5 out of 10. Next week, we will get together, and we will talk about Blast Tyrant by Clutch. We'll see you all.
This has been another episode of Pop Culture Victim by the People, for the People.